And with that, I would like to introduce my friend Cara Welch from the Food and Drug Administration, who will lead off with a presentation on an FDA industry update. And we will have a short Q&A session at the end of Dr. Welch's presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for sticking around, as Michael just said, an opportunity to kind of dig into some topics of particular interest to this group. And FDA particularly, we appreciate these opportunities to speak with regulated industry. I'm going to be going over a number of topics today. And for those of you who were at the session Thursday morning, you're certainly going to see some familiar slides, but hopefully the actual conversation can be tailored to this audience. And as Michael said, I'm going to try to retain about 5-10 minutes at the end for Q&A, so we can go over the questions then. I'll try to keep an eye on the clock. So as Michael said, my name is Cara Welch. I'm with the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. Those of you who are familiar with FDA are aware that we recently became the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. Before this, we were a division within an office. So what does this mean? Why did we do this? It was a long time in the making, certainly. A lot of work going on in the background, a lot of thoughts and discussion going on before we actually committed to doing it. And when you create a new office, or when you do an office level structure, it gets to the level where the Secretary of HHS has to sign off on it. It goes to Congress. So it certainly was an effort, but FDA was very supportive of creating the office, and I think that really demonstrates they see it was necessary to have an Office of Dietary Supplement Programs because of the industry that we're regulating. So the growth of the industry, the size of it, the scope of it, the fact that we deal with simple vitamins and minerals to complex botanical extracts to all the ingredients in the food. Unfortunately, we also deal with other types of products that aren't technically dietary supplements, but they like to market themselves as dietary supplements. So there's a wide range of products that affect our industry. FDA wanted to reflect that, and they reflected it with our office. So while they were able to create an Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, we were not able to necessarily create the size office immediately that we feel is necessary to regulate this industry. So we are doing what we can with the people that we have. With the structure that we have. This is the current structure of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. It's pretty simple. As you can see, there is an immediate office at the top, really looking at policy development, strategic management, strategic development of which resources can we partner with, who can we work with to get done what we feel needs to get done. We have 2 staffs broken out underneath that. On the right is the evaluation and research staff. Largely that is the NDI review team. You may have had some interactions with them if you've been in this industry for a while. The new dietary ingredient review team, or the evaluation and research staff as a whole, they really look at, well, they evaluate and research the safety of dietary supplements. That is kind of a 2-part review. The first is, of course, they review the submissions that come into the agency, the new dietary ingredient notifications. They dig through those. They have a review window of about 75 days, as you're all aware of, drafting a response back as to our conclusion. That group also does de novo reviews, or reviews that we instigate. So when we see products on the market or ingredients in the market that we feel need to be reviewed, that team is the group that kind of goes and digs into the science, both the chemistry and the toxicology of these products. And then on the other side, on the left, is our regulatory implementation staff. And some of you may have had interactions with them too, though probably not on a good side. This is the group that reviews GMP memos or claims reviews, labeling issues. So if you've ever been in trouble with the FDA on labeling or GMPs or disease claims, you may have had some interactions with that staff. That's a wide variety of expertise, certainly. GMPs, digging into the regulation, scientific background. We have chemists, we have pharmacologists, dietitians in that group, digging into what are appropriate claims, when does a structure function claim drift on over into a disease claim. So that's that group. So what does the division to an office, what does that move bring to us? It really it gives us the greater visibility, it puts us on a higher platform within the agency and outside of the agency. So within the agency, it gives us a better ability to influence and direct resources, to request resources directly applicable to our program. It also gives us the opportunity for enhanced partnerships with external parties. So we said before, we are a small staff. We're about 26 FTEs, full-time employees, or full-time equivalents, at full staff, and we're not quite at full staff. So we have 26 people regulating a $40-ish billion industry. This is an opportunity to go to other groups within FDA, go to other groups within HHS, working with NIH, working with other federal partners, working with state agencies, where our interests align and are moving in the same direction. We want to work with them. That's similar for academia and industry. Where we can work together to increase the compliance of this industry, we're certainly going to want to do so. It also gives us an opportunity for partnerships with consumer groups or healthcare practitioners. We want to make sure that we can get the information out so that consumers know what is our industry, what is not our industry, what types of products are they seeking out to purchase. So as we, within the immediate office, are going through sort of a strategic look, we wanted to establish our program priorities. And they were pretty easy to figure out, actually. When we sat in a room and kind of laid everything out in front of us, it became pretty clear quite quickly. And the first and foremost, the top priority is protecting consumers. We are a public health agency. We want to ensure that dangerous products aren't getting to consumers, and if they are in the consumer's hands, that we can remove them. That is our top priority. That is what constantly reprioritizes our activities. So if something were to come up, that's where the activity is directed. We also want to ensure product integrity, product identity, product quality. And this is where I think both new dietary ingredient notification compliance as well as cGMP compliance, cGMP, current good manufacturing practices. That's where firms need to ensure the products they're putting out are actually dietary supplements. They contain actual dietary ingredients. They're manufactured in a manner that consistently consistently puts out a quality product as it was designed in the master manufacturing record. That's important, and we want to do that through enforcement. We need to do that through enforcement. We need to ensure that these are the rules and everyone is held to these rules. But we also need to do it through education and ensuring that industry is aware of the requirements, aware of how best they can comply. So these are areas that we will continue to move forward in. And then the last point is providing education, and that's really certainly providing education to industry, but it's also providing education or information to healthcare practitioners, to consumers, so that they can make informed decisions as to what products they want to purchase, what products they want to take. For healthcare practitioners, ensuring that the information is getting to them. If a consumer wants to talk about the products they're taking, that they can identify them as dietary supplements. If an adverse event were to happen, we want to ensure that healthcare practitioners know there is a way that they can get these reports to the FDA, because this is, of course, valuable information for us. So there's a lot of opportunities. This program priorities is, like I said, it was easy to figure out. The harder part, of course, is how do we make meaningful steps forward in each of these areas. So we really want to keep a big picture approach. We want to look at the authorities that we currently have. Are we using them? Are we using all of them? Are we using them appropriately? I think this is both a look back at how we have been doing things and a look forward of how we want to do things. Have we been going about it the correct way? Is there a better way that we could approach cGMP compliance or NDI compliance? And then, of course, are we doing everything we can to protect the public health? Because that is the mission of our agency. We are a public health agency. And what can we do to make steps forward on that end? So the next two slides are my interpretation of the regulatory responsibilities for industry, kind of boiled down into 6 main points. This by no means covers everything, to be very clear. And you have to be compliant with all the applicable requirements and regulations. But getting down into what firms need to be aware of when they enter into this industry. First and foremost, facility registration. That is a requirement. It's been a requirement since 2002, actually, the Bioterrorism Act. It was amended with the Food Safety Modernization Act in 2011. And we continue to amend that. So be sure that you're aware of food facility registration. And I know that AHPA continues to put information out about how FSMA affects dietary supplements. The new dietary ingredient notification requirement. So if you are creating a product, if you're putting together a product for marketing to consumers, you need to be aware of what ingredients you're using and if a notification is required. I am going to take the opportunity as the first speaker to throw out just a few slides on the NDI guidance, but I know that we're going to have an entire lunchtime session on it, so I'm going to breeze right through it this morning. Know that we will have a good hour to dig into that later on today. Good manufacturing practices. So the cGMPs, obviously a huge area controlling, laying out requirements for the manufacturing, packaging, labeling, and holding of dietary supplements. The next 3, dietary supplement labeling, making sure your product clearly provides to consumers that they are not misled what's in the product. It is important that they know, statement of identity, the ingredients, the level of the ingredients per serving. Structure function notification. Structure function claims are the claims that are described in section 403R6 of the Act. These are, of course, claims that dietary supplements can make about their products. There is a requirement that if you're making a structure function claim, you notify the FDA. So that is one of the responsibilities. And then a post-market responsibility, well, actually, notification is also a post-market responsibility, but the other post-market responsibility is adverse event reporting. There is a requirement that serious adverse events are reported by the firm when they're made aware of them. So reported to the FDA within 15 days. And that's a really valuable area of information for us too. It's not just how the product was designed, how the product was manufactured, but how the product is affecting the consumers once it's in their hands. And the submission of an adverse event report does not indicate causation, to be quite clear. It is an association with a product. It could have nothing to do with the product. It could be something else they're taking, but it's still a requirement. If you're made aware of it, you submit it to the FDA, and we can dig through the specifics of whether or not it was actually caused by your product, a different product, or a completely different situation. Facility registration activities. To be quite clear, the food facility registration requirement is now a biennial requirement. You have to renew your registration every 2 years. And it just so happens that 8 days ago, we entered into the next registration renewal period. So it's now open as of midnight on October 1st. The registration renewal portal opened. Everyone should be getting in there and renewing their registration of their facilities. It's every facility. It's every facility that manufactures, package, labels, or holds food. It's really clearly spelled out, I believe, when you're going through the portal, hopefully, as to whether or not you are required to register. But it's really important that you do this. This is how we find out information about what facilities are out there, what types of facilities they are. Are you dealing with dietary supplements? Are you dealing with foods? Are you dealing with both? But there's also a new requirement, and it was in July of 2016, there was a final rule published, an amendment to the registration of food facilities. I think there were 4 changes. An email address, and there were some very minor things. There was one thing, it used to be an optional move that you indicate not only what type of facility, what type of commodity you're handling, but what activities you are doing at that facility. That's now a requirement. So you have to indicate what you're doing at that facility. Are you holding? Are you labeling? Are you packaging? So that is a requirement now. As you go through the renewal form, make sure you're made aware of that. And that's, again, it's really important for our work planning activities that we can figure out what types of facilities are in each district, how long they may need for an inspection, all of those activities, what type of facility we're walking into when we start an inspection, and that's really important. There's been a number of ingredient-specific activities over the last few years within the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs, office/division, whatever you want to call it. The first, of course, the very most recent one was in August of this year. We published a revised draft NDI guidance. And as I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here today. But I am going to take the opportunity to just clarify that what we published was a draft guidance. It was draft guidance number 2. The first one was in July of 2011. But it is just that. It is a guidance. It is not the rule. It is not the requirement. The final rule for laying out the actual requirement for new dietary ingredient notifications was published in September of 1997. So this is a regulation that has been in place for almost 20 years. So keep that in mind as you kind of work your head around what the draft guidance is saying. The draft guidance is laying out our recommendations of how one might comply with the rule, but the rule is in place, and that's what we're enforcing. So as I said before, we published the original draft in 2011. There was a pretty strong response immediately and kind of dragging out. We did receive thousands of comments. We also had some concerns expressed from Congress members, and we did agree to publish a revised draft guidance. That was mostly to give everyone else a second chance, both us a second chance to put out a draft guidance and you a second chance to comment on it. So please take it very seriously. We want you to read through and indicate to us what still isn't clear, what you have concerns about, what you have questions about, and then we ask for comments on 3 areas in particular. So hopefully you can provide some insight on those as well. As I said before, the stakeholder input is necessary. We did recently extend the comment period from 60 days it would have ended actually Tuesday, I think, Monday. We did extend it. It's now going to be published, or I'm sorry, the comment period will close December 12th of 2016. So you have an extra 60 days. We felt that was acceptable. It gives industry and other stakeholders enough time to gather up their comments, substantive comments, submit them to us, but not delay any of the progress we have. We really want to keep this momentum to reviewing comments, drafting a final guidance, and getting it into clearance. So please don't expect that immediately. These things don't go through very quickly, but do know that we will be working on it. We will be reviewing comments and seeing what changes need to be made and making those changes. So. Additional areas that are confusing or unclear. And then the other 3 areas, well, as we move towards finalizing the guidance, it's important to us. It's really important to us that we clarify what the procedures are, how to identify, or how to sufficiently identify your ingredient, how to sufficiently lay out your basis for the safety of that ingredient. We believe it will result in more notifications than we've historically seen. We usually see about 35 to 50 notifications a year. This last year, we just closed out our fiscal year 2016, and I believe we responded to more than 60 notifications. So we did see a bump this last year. We'll see if that continues over the next few years. And then it also sets the stage for future actions for those who choose not to comply. So this is us clearly laying out what, our interpretation of the requirement. So it provides us information. It also provides industry information. If you choose not to comply, we can move forward. There was also some other ingredient-specific activities over the last year or so. One was actually also quite recent. I said the draft guidance was most recent. That was not correct. So we published a Federal Register notice in early September, and it was regarding a particular ingredient called Vinpocetine or Vinpocetine, however you want to pronounce it. The Federal Register notice is part of an administrative proceeding. The administrative proceeding is something laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations. You can see it there. Basically, we published our tentative conclusion about the regulatory status of Vinpocetine. We are requesting comments from stakeholders specifically to either confirm or deny our conclusion, change our conclusion. But that's all it is at this point. We are not enforcing on Vinpocetine. We are not removing it from the market at this time. We are requesting comments. That's what we are doing. So there is no official position on the regulatory status of Vinpocetine, and there's no action at this point. So the Federal Register notice, if you have not already seen it, we lay out our tentative conclusion that Vinpocetine does not meet the definition of a dietary ingredient. And when we say that, we mean specifically to Section 201 FF1 of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So it's not a vitamin, a mineral, an herb, or botanical, continue on through the various points. It's based on our review of the information that's available to us. So if stakeholders have additional information that's important, we hope that you can submit that to us. The second is that Vinpocetine is excluded from the definition of a dietary supplement. What does that mean? Essentially, when we refer to that, we are referring to Section 201 FF3B of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, where we believe Vinpocetine was authorized for investigation as a new drug. There was an IND authorized for it. It underwent substantial clinical investigations. Those investigations were made public before it was ever marketed as a food or dietary supplement, legally marketed as a food or dietary supplement. So that would be a longer reach, certainly. Firms would have to demonstrate to us that Vinpocetine was marketed as a food or dietary supplement before it was authorized for investigation. And we'll see if we can get that information. We tried to lay out our position of how we came to that conclusion. And we are requesting input on this position. That was, again, a 60-day comment period that closes on November 7th. So, cannabidiol. Cannabidiol, or CBD, if I refer to it as that in the future. Cannabidiol products actually are in a very similar position to the tentative conclusion for Vinpocetine. This one, however, is not a tentative conclusion. FDA has concluded that cannabidiol products are excluded from the definition of a dietary supplement. This is based on the exact same provision. So now Section 201 FF3B II of the Act. We believe CBD products were authorized for investigation as a new drug. Substantial clinical trials were implemented, made public, before it was ever marketed as a food or dietary supplement, legally marketed as a food or dietary supplement. We have laid out this position in a question and answer on FDA's webpage. You can find that. I don't have it on my slide, but you can Google it pretty easily. And any information that you may have to dispute that position, we do hope that you can provide that to us, but, and you don't actually have to go through a docket to submit that information to us. But to date, we have not received any information to change this position. So this is our position. FDA has issued 2 sets of warning letters. We have 14 letters in total to those marketing CBD products. They were not all marketed as dietary supplements, but they all did receive warning letters. And they were specifically marketed as unapproved drugs because they were making some pretty wild disease claims. Some of the claims, combat psychosis disorders, neurodegenerative disorders, tumor and cancer cells, depression disorders, diabetes, Crohn's disease. These are claims that are not acceptable. They are not approved for CBD. The products were not legally approved drugs, so we felt very comfortable sending out warning letters on these, and I think everyone in the room would agree that these are unacceptable claims. So we will continue to watch the market for these types of claims, and hopefully we don't continue to see them. We also have sent some NDI warning letters, or warning letters that touched on NDI charges. So in particular, we had one, it was actually September of 2015, so a little over a year ago, that talked about bitter orange extract. And bitter orange extract, we were not necessarily saying bitter orange extract is a new dietary ingredient, but this particular extract was standardized to 30% synephrine. And as we laid out in the warning letter, that is higher than we ever saw previously, as much as we could show in the natural extract, either in the natural dried plant or a typical ethanol extract. So this was concentrating one particular constituent, or concentrating certain particular constituents up to 30% synephrine. This has actually created a new dietary ingredient. I don't know if bitter orange extract is new or old, but 30% synephrine is certainly new. And we didn't see it on the market before, so a notification was required. There was no notification on file, and we did send a warning letter. So this is an example of where you can certainly take something that wasn't a new dietary ingredient, and through processing, through innovation, making a new dietary ingredient. It's really important that you're made aware of the requirement before you start marketing these products. cGMP activities. The cGMPs, the current good manufacturing practices, this is a rule that has been in place for 9 years now. I think this is really important to lay out. It's quickly becoming not a new rule, and I think that firms need to be made aware of that. The compliance date for the mouse thingy off. The compliance date for all size firms has been in place for 6 years now, so there's really no excuse. The cGMPs are established to ensure, as we said before, product quality, product consistently, purity and safety. And it applies to all firms who manufacture, package, label, or distribute dietary supplements. This is both domestic and foreign. If your product is sold in the US, it should be compliant, it should be manufactured under cGMP conditions. Otherwise, it's an adulterated product, to be quite clear. Dietary supplement inspections, we have been doing as much as we can to increase the number of inspections over the last few years. And I apologize, I just told you we closed out the fiscal year FY16 recently, but it's very recently, and we usually give our district offices about a month to close out all their cases and enter it into the database. So come the end of October, we'll get that locked down into place, and we'll start pulling numbers and reviewing the information. But you can see over the last 5 years, we've maintained 350 to 500, almost 600 inspections. These are only domestic inspections of dietary supplement firms. And And we're going to continue to push this inspection rate because it's really important. It gets us into the facility. It gets us seeing what types of products they're producing, what types of conditions they're producing them under, what types of claims you're making on the products, because this is a great resource for the products that are getting distributed on the market that we might not be aware of, but when we're in the facility, we can see these labels. We can see the ingredients that you're using. We can ask about the safety information or the, whether it's new or old, and what have you done to make sure you're in compliance with these other requirements. The next three columns, OAI, VAI, and NAI, that is, for those of you who haven't seen this slide before, that's the result of the compliance, our evaluation of the compliance of that firm. So OAI is official action indicated, which means FDA needs to take action to bring them into compliance. This means there's some serious non-compliance. They can't do it on their own. Voluntary action indicated is the middle one. That means there was some observations of non-compliance, but we believe the firm can bring themselves back into compliance on their own. We'll try to give them as much direction. Voluntary compliance is a goal. And then the last one is no action indicated, which means largely compliant at that time, at least. So that's really the goal of what we would like to see. We would like to see higher percentages under NAI, and we would like to see the OAI percentage drop consistently. So we'll see what happened over the last fiscal year in the next couple months. But what we have seen, I'm going to skip a slide, then go back. What we have seen are consistently, we're still seeing violations in the fundamental areas of cGMP compliance. This is the number of times a particular citation was listed on or was observed during the inspection. So what we're seeing is the first one, you can dig through the actual citations later on, but the first one is lack of finished product specifications, not knowing what type of product you're setting out to make. The next two of the next three are master manufacturing records and batch production records. So clearly having a recipe for every formulation and batch size that you're producing, and then a record of when you produce it, what type of product are you making? Are you following the master manufacturing record? There's a few in the top 5 that are lack of testing. The third one in is 11175A1. That is particularly the lack of identity testing of dietary ingredients. This is a requirement. It is a requirement 100% of the time to do identity testing for an incoming dietary ingredient. And we still have firms who either aren't doing it every time, are relying on a certificate of analysis, or are doing it with a really crappy test, which means nothing then. So regardless, we're seeing materials come in, dietary ingredients come in that are not tested for identity. And then if you have no finished product specifications, you don't know what you're setting out to make anyway. So these are concerning violations. We will continue to hit on this hard, and we hope that we start to see some changes. What I would love to see are the changes of these violations, move into more particular violations, lack of having a particular record as opposed to lack of all testing. But at this point, these are fundamentals, the basics of a cGMP system, and we're still seeing firms who are unaware of them, which is concerning. I'm going back a slide now. This is the warning letters enforcement actions that we have been taking over the last few years, last 5 years again. We try to send out these warning letters regularly, publicly notifying the firm as well as others who can find it on FDA.gov of what the violations are. A warning letter is an advisory action. It is us advising the firm of their violations, but we do write in there that this may not be all of the violations we observed. Additionally, contact us within 15 days of your plan of how to bring your products into compliance. Unfortunately, we also see firms who pay lip service to a warning letter or completely ignore it. Either way, they're not implementing the changes that we think need to be implemented. And a follow-up inspection, those firms that are demonstrating the repeated non-compliance, who are choosing not to comply with the requirements, that's when we move into the next couple columns of injunction or seizure. These are judicial actions. These are serious actions from the FDA. They're resource intensive on our part. The district, the center, our office are resource intensive. It goes to chief counsel within FDA. For judicial actions, we have to work through the Department of Justice. So it's resource intensive for all of those parties. Still, this is important to us, and we will continue to move forward with enforcement. Labeling activities. I am not sure if you are aware, but we've had some exciting times at the FDA, one of which is a rollout of a revised nutrition facts label. And you may say, what does that really care to me? I don't do foods, I do supplements. The nutrition facts label also revises the supplement facts label. So please be aware of the changes that are coming. I have 5 minutes. That's okay. I think I'm almost done. Please be aware of the changes that are coming. There are some changes that do affect the supplement facts label, some more than others. And there is a rollout period. Now, with labeling changes, we do try to provide enough advance notice that you are aware of it. You can work it into the next run that you do of your labels. We know that you run a lot of labels in advance. But July of 2018, I'm guessing the majority of the labels will need to be changed by then. There's generally a compliance rollout for some of the smaller firms. But July 2018, please be aware. Just a pretty picture of, this is again the nutrition facts label. We didn't have a picture readily available of the two supplement facts panels, an example of the supplement facts panels, but you can see when you lay them up together, on the right is the new one, on the left is the old one. So for the food labels out there, we're obviously highlighting certain characteristics. We're adding things to the label. We're changing some of the required nutrients that must be listed. So you might not have calories on it, but if you do, you have to increase your calorie number. Added sugars is now a line that's added to it, changing out some of the required nutrients that must be listed and changing out how they're listed. So sometimes an IU is now supposed to be listed as a microgram or milligram. So please be aware of that. You have some time, but hopefully you can get the support you need either from FDA or from your local trade association. With that, I thank you. See, I really was serious. I had 5 minutes left. And more than willing to take questions. I think I have five minutes.
And let me request, actually, let me make a point. I neglected to say this session was sponsored by New Herbs Company, and we thank you very much, Wilson, for your support for bringing this session to us.
Thank you, Wilson.
And if you could, on the questions, as Cara has mentioned a couple of times, we have 1 hour devoted to NDI. If you could hold your NDI questions for that time. If you're desperate to bring your NDI question forward now, go ahead, but you will have another opportunity there. But please go ahead.
Hello. You mentioned about the ID creepy test. Can you please give us some examples of what tests you consider creepy test?
For identity?
Yes.
Okay. That's actually a good point, and I thank you for asking that question. Identity testing, there is always the next new test that's going to be great and revolutionize the industry. It is very important that you be aware of what is the valid method for your product and your ingredient, what is scientifically valid and what is fit for purpose. What works for one product ingredient may not work for another ingredient. There may be matrix interferences. It may be a complex mixture and a simple test like FTIR doesn't work. Organoleptic is valid in certain cases. It is not valid in other cases. It is up to industry to demonstrate what is, the GMPs are written with some flexibility in mind. That's the benefit of the dietary supplement, cGMP. Dietary supplement manufacturers know the most about their products, so they're the ones who establish the specifications. FDA does not say, this is what your identity specification needs to be. Once you set your specification, you also determine what is the scientifically valid and fit for purpose method to verify the specification has been met. There are times when organoleptic analysis is perfectly appropriate. There are times when chemical analysis is the only thing that works. But we do allow organoleptic, macroscopic and microscopic, FTIR or near IR. We've heard a lot about DNA authentication, DNA barcoding over the last couple years. Powerful methods. They're all powerful in their own right, but there is no one method that works for all of them. And I think that's really important that you understand what ingredients you're bringing into your facility and what methodologies will work, which ones you can do in-house, which ones you have to contract out, and the analysts that you need for them. They must be properly trained. They must have the proper expertise. So while I could run an IR with the best of them and LC and GC, I can do that, muddle my way through maybe, organoleptic analysis would mean nothing to me. And so I would never be an appropriately trained analyst for organoleptic analysis. I can't tell the difference between, I can't even come up with two botanicals, so I would not be appropriate. So ensuring that you have documented the training of your analysts is really important. And if need be, maybe they need to be retrained. Maybe they need to go through regular training, an annual test or something like that. So I appreciate the question, and I apologize for not necessarily giving you a strict answer, but it's really important that you all know what is the appropriate test for your material, and be prepared to answer the questions when we question you, because we will.
And can I ask, as you ask your questions, part of what we're doing here in this community is getting to know each other, so if you could identify yourself when you ask your questions, that would be appreciated.
Good morning, Dr. Welch. My name is Gary from CAMAG Scientific. I wanted your opinion on the violations. From my math, it hasn't really dramatically decreased since 2011. It's about 6%. Could you talk about industry, trade organizations' role in the decline of that? Because I don't think it's been very dramatic. And if you could provide other suggestions, whether it's more education, how is that addressed? Because I feel like it's still pretty high.
You said the compliance rate, right?
Yes.
Okay, I missed the first part. Boy, that's a tough question. And that's something we are muddling our way through as well, because the rate of noncompliance is something that we are not happy with either. So ways in which, if regulated industry has some ideas for us that we can implement, us being the agency, please let us know. Education, partnership, that's all valuable. However, I do have some concerns that the people we need to reach aren't attending these sessions, and they aren't necessarily attending the trade shows, they aren't necessarily attending these sessions, they aren't going to the educational opportunities that are out there. So we need to somehow reach them, and I don't know if that's a B2B relationship where you can put pressure on your own, either competitors or customers or along those lines, somewhere in the supply chain, or whether it needs to be agency-driven. We will continue to push forward on enforcement, but we are open to the educational opportunities that are needed. So an opportunity like of us coming to a large trade show like this, I think, is an opportunity for us to get the message out. But we really need to carry it to the next step of they need the help they can get to come into compliance. I don't have an answer for that one either.
Let me add a comment to that. I think I am always interested, how are we doing compared to other industries? And the answer there is also not very well. If you look at the data from either the food industry or the drug industry, they don't have 100% NAI. But they have about 70% NAI, and the portion that is not is almost all VAI. OAI is really rare in the food industry and the drug industry. And I think now they've had their regulations in place much longer, but as Cara mentioned, ours is already in place quite a long time. It'll be interesting to see how the food industry deals with the new rules established under FSMA. And there will certainly be a learning curve there too, but I do think it's important to hold that perspective, and even when we compare to our colleagues in the food industry, we need to continue to improve to get to that expected level that's not perfect, but needs to be better than it is.
This is follow-up on the first question for analytical testing for dietary ingredients. How do we deal with analysis or identification when there are no standard? Giving you an example, like collagen, USP doesn't have a method. USP using milk protein as a total assay, as a Kjeldahl's method, it's just a nitrogen estimation. So I'd like to hear your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Roy wants to answer this actually. There are other things out there than USP. And there are opportunities to participate in developing methodologies and monographs that are not USP. You can identify, I mean, you can certainly work through USP. You can also work through other avenues. And I think it's important that the dietary supplement industry kind of carry that along from the very beginning. The goal was not to impose upon and use only a very set pharmacopoeia or only a very set monograph. They wanted options, and I think it's important that they have options because one extract is not like another extract. So I think this is an opportunity where industry needs to work within industry and other associations to develop the monographs and the testing methodologies. If there isn't one for you, develop it. If it's possible, develop it and publish it. Get it out there. We will look at when FDA determines whether, if someone comes to us and says there isn't valid methodology, we're going to go ahead and question that. So we're going to go to various resources. We're going to look at published literature as well and say, well, there is. And this is where we see it. It's published. It's available to the public. That's important.
Time for just one more question.
Roy Upton, American Herbal Pharmacopoeia. Cara, on the compliance side, how do we reconcile inconsistencies we see on the inspection side, where we see inspectors who have greater or lesser bodies of knowledge regarding botanical ID, for example, approving of techniques in one firm but not in another, or we have farmer inspectors inspecting supplement companies and food inspectors inspecting supplement companies, and not necessarily a great inconsistency there. And I wonder how those numbers would change if there was greater consistency on the knowledge base of the inspectors. Any way to address this to get more consistent training so your inspectors understand this sector better?
There will always be some variation because we have human investigators inspecting these facilities. We do what we can, and I think there are many ways in which we're attempting to address this. So the investigator training comes from the center because we evaluate all the warning letters, we evaluate all the injunctions. These advisory and these judicial actions can't go out to firms unless they come through my shop. And my shop also provides the training for the investigators. So there is that. It's also an opportunity to, ORA is our Office of Regulatory Affairs, and they are boots on the ground. They are our district offices, they are the district labs, they are the people who are in your facilities. Those people, so Office of Regulatory Affairs is doing what they can to not silo, but put certain experienced investigators in certain areas, and there will be medical products and foods investigators, and that's their opportunity to kind of highlight certain expertises and focus their energies in certain areas. But yes, there always will be some inconsistency. What we hope to do is to mitigate that inconsistency by carrying it to the next level if there is anything that is rising to the level of a warning letter, untitled letter, warning letter, regulatory meeting, or injunction, seizure. It has to come through us so that it is consistent. But you're right, if they're in the facility and they don't see a problem, those are the ones we wouldn't necessarily see. So it's providing education and what can we do to, if we don't have the expertise, to bring the expertise in for our field staff, and that's important too. Thank you.
If you would all join me in thanking Dr. Welch for her presentation.